As games journalism continues to claw onto their last life raft of relevance in the form of whatever this Gamergate 2 is manifesting in, they are doing their damnedest to just simply ride out what is left off of this and then just fall by the wayside like their other traditional media outlet brethren. You had the scare over there at Kotaku where they would have to go ahead and, I don't know, write about games and create guides. You have their sister brand in the AV Club getting sold off, Deadspin, The Onion, Jezebel, everything under the GO media banner, just, GOing out of the building. Gamasutra completely and totally falling off, GameSpot being a shell of its former self, but one of the former juggernauts in the industry, IGN, which has always been kind of a meme site. Remember, 7 out of 10, too much water. They've always kind of been a joke, but then again, they've always been one of the market drivers, at least when games journalism had the biggest microphone. Now, in an age of independent voices really driving the medium, they're probably the strongest brand remaining, but that's not saying all that much. That's kind of like being the toughest third grader. Not exactly an accomplishment that you would try to laud for yourself. They've found themselves embroiled in a lot of this Gamergate stuff because, of course, that's what the industry is doing right now, trying to obfuscate from its own problems. Hell, there's a lot of interesting stuff to cover right now with the impending collapse of the AAA industry, coupled with the rise of the indie developers in the indie market. If you went and you highlighted that stuff and showed all the good that's out there in gaming right now, hell, you might have a compelling website that people would be incentivized to engage with. But no. Instead, just double down on the old tactics of attacking gamers for an easy pop, only to walk back a couple of days later. I think I talked about this last time we discussed Stellar Blade, or the time before that, when IGN, their France affiliate, went out and had a searing critique of the Stellar Blade demo, where, you got that character of Eve, and she just looks like a sex doll that is created by somebody who has never seen a real life woman. I was like, okay, cool, we understand that, people with Western sensibilities think that real women only wear a size 16 dress or over, and we've been over this time and time again, okay? Character of Eve is based on a real Korean model, and yeah, it's a desirable and very attainable body archetype, either through natural or means to which, as some people have referred to as unnatural, if you're so inclined to dabble in the dark. But it's not outlandish, okay? Rob Liefeld draws outlandish women. I love them for that. Instead of just simply talking about the gameplay, the story, the boss fights that are on display in the demo, no. You just had to attack the main character because that's what you would think would best play to your audience, which is your peers in the gaming industry. And you ended up playing a stupid game, and guess what? You won a stupid prize. But in IGN's apology, okay, it's not, it wasn't an official IGN outlet. It was just, an affiliate. It was a sister company that was out there, and the actions have been taken. It's fine. The design of the game, yes, might be good, but Eve is just boring, right? A doll sexualized by somebody who has never seen a woman. And yeah, we've ran the comparisons back and forth. IGN doing the IGN thing of, we're sorry, that was France, translation error, we received threats, stop picking on us, okay, we're good boys, we didn't do nothing. But I don't know, man, haven't seen a retraction of what IGN proper is doing. For as much as they want to distance themselves from their French affiliate, they still have this sterling piece of work up there right now in the form of, okay, they've got to, at least, hey man, I got to give them credit on this one because they have their eye on the future when it comes to the gaming industry, and specifically the AAA space. And over the past 10 years, you could just go back to the original game and the fact that it was remade on the Nintendo GameCube in the mid-aughts. The Resident Evil Remake series that they really kicked off with 2, that 5 years ago at this point in time, it's kind of wild to think about, ended up stumbling quite a bit with 3, and then 4 was an unmitigated success. Everybody who played it really enjoyed it, either thought that it supplanted or it was a nice companion piece to the original. I don't know, Resident Evil is not really my game. But then they're wondering, okay, cool, where do you go from there? Okay, what's the next one to remake? And well, knowing that mainline Resident Evils currently go all the way up to an 8th iteration, you've gone all the way up to 4 so far, and you haven't really touched on any of the side games that are out there. You know, you've got a big boulder punching question out there in the offset as to what is this studio going to be doing in the future, and the idea of a remake for Resident Evil 5, the Resident Evil game that I actually have played the most. Okay, I thought it was goofy and funny, and I didn't really think too much of it after, you know, just an initial playthrough. But hearing all of the high quality care that these games receive upon a remake, I might be tempted to be partially interested in it, but according to IGN, no. This is the Resident Evil game that cannot be remade. Oh, I wonder why. If you know anything about the setting of Resident Evil 5, it has become infamous in recent years because brain-dead journalists don't understand that black people live in Africa. The game is set in Africa. There is a virus that takes over local populations, and Chris Redfield has to go in there and neutralize the threat. But they only see it, games journalists, they only see it through the lens of, why is this white guy shooting this black guy? Like, oh, you guys, you're stupid. With Resident Evil 4's release last year, Capcom's project to remake the glory years of the Survivor horror series is complete. But as the game's post-credit scene suggests, the remakes aren't over. So the big question is, what is next? Obvious answer is to remake Resident Evil 5, which, yeah, okay, if you're going to be remaking games, I think from a technical perspective, Resident Evil 5, it's a prime candidate, okay? Some of those controls are a little bit clunky. It was from the early days of the Xbox 360, PS3, 7th generation era that could definitely use an updating, okay? You still got clunky tank controls now that you have more streamlined FPS, dual stick controls. It's like, yeah, from a technical perspective, prime candidate, but no, the gameplay's too offensive, right? But on the game's 15th anniversary, it's clear that moving forward chronologically will take Capcom's remakes into the series' weakest era. Yeah, 5 and 6 kind of ass, bruh, when you ask the series veterans, okay? An era of gameplay and narrative decisions best left in the past. Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade, at least not to the standard of Capcom's best work. Oh, really? Because we've seen their recent work and the fact that they want to go ahead and mire expert gameplay under heaps of microtransactions and shady business practices. And this has always been Capcom's calling card, by the way. I think it kind of started with Resident Evil 5, now that I think about it. It was definitely with Azura's Wrath that came out not that long after, in around the same time frame as Resident Evil 5, where you had on-disc DLC. Capcom was the biggest offenders among them. And to try to say, especially in a post-Street Fighter and Street Fighter 6 economy, they have standards for their best work, don't make me laugh. And so the answer is not to remake, but to rewrite. Well, yeah, of course, because, I don't know, some white guy in San Francisco might feel a little bit uncomfortable playing a game where he shoots black people. Resident Evil is a survival horror series. Resident Evil 5, not so much. These are the idiots who also want to deride certain games. It's like, oh, it's from a role-playing game. It's from a role-playing franchise. It doesn't have the role-playing elements that I like. Shut up. And now that you know that, playing Resident Evil 5. Yeah, genre snobs. Like, yeah, but what about that game, though? Sure, it features a constant flow of horrific imagery. Very racist. Why would you say that, IGN? Yeah, but for Resident Evil 5 is an action game through and through. Yeah, no. That's the way that it was sold, that's the way that it was created, and that's the way that it was played. Not shocking at all. That's evident in its cover shooter mechanics, vehicle classes with on-rail turret sequences, and the constant rattle of assault rifles. And to be completely honest, Resident Evil 4, given the fact that it's probably the most prolific, high-profile release in the series, like, it has some horror elements to it, kind of like the body horror of Resident Evil 5, but you wouldn't really consider it if you weren't told that it was a part of the franchise to be a part of the same games that the previous 3 were. I have little epochs when it comes to the mainline Resident Evil games, but I digress. Rather than reflect on the tenets that were the foundation of its existence. Ooh, this guy went to school to learn a couple of $10 words. Resident Evil 5 looked at the contemporary gaming zeitgeist in an attempt to find a new lease on life. The result was an unholy hybrid of Resident Evil 5, Gears of War, and Call of Duty. It's as ugly and unwielding wieldy as it sounds. Yeah, you started to get to that homogeneity of gameplay in and around that time, but in Gears of War and Call of Duty, you have a third-person cover-based shooter, and you have the gold standard, at least at the time, of first-person shooters. Not quite the same. I don't even know if the original release of Resident Evil 5 had a first-person mode, but hey man, you guys do you. It's IGN after all. You guys are the standard bearers in the gaming industry. The design appears not just to be misguided attempt to follow Western success, but also a misreading of its predecessor, with Resident Evil 4 director Shinji Mikami deftly intervened the series through the use of a new over-the-shoulder camera angle. The perspective allowed for more kinetic, action-heavy gameplay. Despite this, Mikami never lost sight of the terror at the core of Resident Evil. But a virus that infects a population of foreign people, at least the Western audiences, because that takes place in Spain, by the way. Nobody has a problem with shooting Spanish, but they do with undisclosed African peoples. Very strange bigotry that you have on display here, but whatever. But I think that body horror is sufficiently frightening, but alright. Mr. Oh, I don't think it's scary, therefore it's not a horror game. Okay, alright there. Got a badass over here. Through the use of enemies that were strategically placed to provide in our undulating waves of tension and fear, and the inclusion of Ashley as your, much derided at the time sidekick. Combat encounters were focused on surviving overwhelming horrors rather than dominating foes. Resident Evil 5, meanwhile, presents its enemies as waves to be gunned down with an increasingly powerful weaponry. Gee, it almost seems like it's a game that's the prime target for a remake. Wow, it almost sounds like a scuttled concept through modern technology could be revised into something great, but oh no, you got a problem with one aspect of it. I get it. The purpose is cannon fodder. That's what the enemies in shooter-based games are, after all, okay? It's an object placed between you and the end of the game by the developers. Ta-da! Yeah, wall of meat to slow your progress through levels. And those levels are not locations to be explored. Instead, they are largely funnels to push you, from entrance to exit. Yeah, geez. It almost sounds like this is a game, if it was to be remade, could be expanded upon. But why don't you want to do it? Why? Tell me. Oh, but you don't, because you think that these screenshots and then this caption, Resident Evil 5's depiction of Africa as the dark continent, is harmful. Why? One of its nicknames. It's an accurate nickname. And because you have such bigotry of low expectations, you unironically write this line. But all of this doesn't account for Resident Evil 5's most notorious problem, racism. Why, by showing Africa somehow racist? Okay. Set in a fictional West African country, Resident Evil 5's primary antagonists are black people. No, it's Wesker, because he's trying to inflict the world with total global saturation. But okay, cool. What do I know? I just played the game back in the cut. Yes, technically it's the Ouroboros virus. Oh, so technically it's something different than I want it to be. Good journalism we have here. That protagonist, Chris Redfield, is fighting. But the parasite host is depicted as a nation of mobs and primitives who are violent even before their infection. I would just like to go ahead, because the Ouroboros virus sounds an awful lot like the spores from The Last of Us, and it's almost like this virus. This virus mutates its host, make it the most feral creature possible. It's almost like it's being puppeted, and it has nothing to do with the bodily autonomy of individuals. It is just simply the host in order for the virus's worst aspects to play out. What are you trying to allude to here? This insensitive treatment of people of color was hotly debated even as early as Resident 5's debut trailer, with writers such as, Nagai Corral and Stephen Totillo, games industry parasites, even back in the cut, pointing out the game's uncomfortable post-colonial imagery. Now see, like I said before, Resident Evil, not really my franchise, okay? And I'm not inclined to play any of these games. So I'm not going to tell you how or why you should remake a game. I can offer suggestions based on other remakes and retellings of stories that I've seen done better throughout the past, but I think I have better ideas than the people who purport to write about games journalism, but who in the same breath also unironically parent the points like that was 2009, a time when race was apparently a debate rather than a reality in the 2010 or 2020s, in a post Black Lives Matter world where there is only one acceptable response to a white man shooting waves of Africans for an entire video game. No, they just want to go ahead and shut down debate instead of figuring out, okay, do we want to remake Resident Evil 5? Their answer is no, and that's so great. That's so great if you're trying to engage a dwindling audience that, once again, instead of engaging with debate, instead of engaging in thought-provoking subject matter, you're just going to continue to preach from on high. IGN, never change. Never change, because I kind of want to see you resigned to the dustbin of history, like your other counterparts in the gaming industry will be by the end of this year. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.